Yesterday we learned trig derivatives. Today we are going to talk about the chain rule, which is how you derive functions that look like composite functions. So things that have a function plugged into another function. So they refer to u as the inner function, y as the outer function, and y, the outer function has u in it. So u is g of x, y is f of u because this u is inside of f. So how do you find the derivative? Well, y prime times u prime is one way to think about it. Also, dy du would be the derivative of y in terms of u, times du dx, which would be the derivative of u in terms of x. Those du's cancel out, and we end up with the derivative of y in terms of x, or the derivative of the function. The first thing you need to be able to do before you can do the chain rule is be able to recognize the inner function and the outer function. So, for this one, our inner function is x squared plus 1. Our outer function is radical u, or u to the 1/2. Might be a better way to think about it. Number 2, inner function, x squared, not x squared, x to the 4th minus 3. And our outer function would be that u that we were given over here, cubed. Next one, inner function, x cubed plus 1, and our outer would be 1 over that u value because u is down here. Number 4, inner function, tangent of x, because it's plugged into cosine, and that's our u, so our outer is cosine of u. 5, inner, 1 plus x squared, outer, sine of that 1 plus x squared that we called u. 6, x squared, and sine of u. These are very similar, they just have different things plugged into their sign. So 5 and 6 are very similar. 7 you need to think about a little bit. This is actually the same as sine of x squared. So our inner is our sine of x, and our outer is our u squared. Now, when I find a derivative using the chain rule, we have to derive the outer function, leaving the inner function the same, and then multiply by the derivative of the inner function. So, I'm going to write this as f prime of x equals x squared plus 1 to the 1/2. Now, let's look at what the outer function is. So in other words, let's ignore our inner function for a second. And we're going to derive, we haven't started to derive yet, sorry, I just wrote that incorrectly. When we take the derivative, we're going to derive the outside. Well, when you have something to the 1/2 power, that's going to be 1/2 times something to the negative 1/2. Now, if you remember what was under there, it was x squared plus 1. So that's what stays in our inside, our u. But then, we have to multiply by this u's derivative. Well, the derivative of x squared plus 1 is 2x. And we can simplify a little bit. Our 2 and our 1/2 cancel out. So f prime of x is equal to x squared plus 1 to the negative 1/2 times x. Or x over the square root of x squared plus 1. Let's try another one. Sine squared of x. Let's rewrite this as what it really means, sine of x squared. Again, ignore your inner function for a second. How do you derive something squared? Well, it becomes 2 something to the first. The first is optional, but I'm going to write it there just for these purposes. What was in there? A sign. So I'm going to put a sign back in. The inside doesn't change. But then I have to multiply by the derivative of the inside, and the derivative of sine is cosine. we end up with a y prime that is 2 sine x cosine x. The next one, nothing really to rewrite, but I'm going to scribble over my inner function. I'm going to ask you, how do we derive something to the 100th power? Well, our power comes out front, and we have that same thing to the 99. Well, what was our inner function? It was x cubed minus 1. And we need to multiply by its derivative, which would be 3x squared plus 0. So we end up with f prime of x being 300x squared, x cubed minus 1 to the 99. Next one is a little bit tricky, not terrible if you rewrite it. So if I rewrite this function as f of x equals x squared plus x plus 1 to the negative 1/3, cube root is the 1/3 power, move it to the numerator, it becomes negative. Now I can handle it just like I did. Ignore your inner function for a second. Derivative of something to the negative 1/3 power is negative 1/3 times that something to the negative 4/3. Negative 1/3 minus 1 is the same as 1/3 minus 3/3, which is negative 4/3. Keep that in mind. Now, refer back to your inner function. It stays in the inside, and we multiply by its derivative, which is 2x plus 1. And when we rewrite it, we get negative stays at the top, the 2x plus 1 stays at the top, and at the bottom we have our 3, and our x squared plus x plus 1 to the 4/3. I don't care if you turn it back into a radical, but I do care that you make your exponents positive for your final answers. Finally, this one's a little tricky. I'm going to get you rolling and let you finish it on your own. So, y prime, we're going to need the product rule, but for each of those derivatives, we're going to need the chain rule. So, product rule tells us it's the first, so keep the first one unchanged, times the second. Now on the second, think of that being gone, the derivative of something to the fourth would be 4 something to the third, and we put that something back inside. From there, we have to multiply by the derivative of the inside, which is 3x squared minus 1, plus, second half of our chain rule would say to leave the second, and now we have to multiply by the derivative of the first. Derivative of something to the fifth is 5 something to the fourth, and our something is 2x plus 1, and the derivative of that is 2. From here, it is best to think about this as pulling out your GCF. So if we look at these two terms, we can take out a 2. We can take out a 2x plus 1 to the fourth because we have 5 in the first term and 4 in the second term. And we can take out an x cubed minus x plus 1 to the third power because we have 3 in the first term and 4 in the second term. We are left with, in the first term, a 4, a 2x plus 1, and a 3x squared minus 1. And in our second term, we have a 5, and we have a x cubed minus x plus 1. Sorry for the space issue there. Keep these out front. Y prime is 2 times 2x plus 1 to the fourth times x cubed minus x plus 1. All of this stuff that's in brackets over here, FOIL together. When you do that, you will get 17x cubed plus 6x squared minus 9x plus 3. And that is your final answer. If you have questions, come with them tomorrow.